Telecom sector in India is clearly heading towards a duopoly, or is likely heading towards a duopoly, with Reliance Jio and Airtel fortifying their positions as the top two operators in the country amid a rapid fall in subscriber for Vodafone Idea. Now, Jio and Airtel are steadily gaining users at the expense of loss-making Vodafone Idea, which has been unable to compete with its financially stronger rivals despite merging in the August of 2018. Joining us at this point in time, Llyod Mathias, who's a business strategist. Also with me, my colleague Kartik. Let me come to you, Llyod. Does it look like there is a monopoly here at the top corner? Because we are given to understand that Vodafone, despite its fervent efforts to remain in the game, and despite government infusion of money, it seems that it still continues to lose its user base.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Shweta. I think you're raising a very critical point, because I think we're moving in the direction of a duopoly. While on paper, clearly we have four players. We have Airtel, we have Jio, we have Vodafone Idea and BSNL. I think in terms of sheer customer acquisitions, if you look at the last 18-month timeline, I think the additions are really coming across really fundamentally to Jio and to Airtel, and largely at the expense of Vodafone Idea, to some extent BSNL as well. And that, to my mind, is a dangerous duopoly. The moment you have kind of two well-entrenched players with deep pockets, I think then consumer interest starts getting hindered. And if I just pick two global examples, the US and Singapore, I think even such advanced markets like the US and Singapore have at least three viable players, right? Whether it's AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint in the US. In Singapore, you've got the three players. I think it's always good for a kind of competitive, and India's telecom has reached this wonderful spot because of competition, sometimes intense competition, like we saw in the 2007 to 11 period when there are 13 operators. But I think anything less than, kind of three viable operators makes for a tight position, and consumer interest gets hindered in the long run.
Okay. In a vibrant and emerging country like India, what is the prime reasons for telcos losing business?
I think that the loss in business is really coming, in a sense, from one quarter, Vodafone Idea. And I think that telco has been beleaguered in a sense. In the last 3-4 years, they haven't really been making significant investments in improving their infrastructure. In fact, if you look at the whole 4G adoption, they've been the slowest off the block. They've been struggling to pay off some of their existing dues. I think the AGRs are building up. The government has been kind of infusing a few SOPs by taking equity. Now, technically, the government has more than 30% of the Vodafone Idea entity, right? So both the Aditya Birla Group and Vodafone Incorporated are, in a sense, smaller owners of the Vodafone Idea. But I think just the lack of sheer investments is what's beginning to hurt consumers. For subscribers, you really want a great seamless service. And there are subscribers who are worried about the quality of service they're getting, the quality of their connections. And these subscribers are willingly moving either to Airtel or to Jio. And BSNL has been more, you can say, a silent player working out of the public sector, but really no real growth being driven. So I think until you have a really competitive industry where 3 or 4 players are fighting hard, lowering subscriber rates, improving quality of service, bidding aggressively, I think that's when an industry becomes vibrant. Beyond that, it's always a bit of a challenge when it comes to consumer interest.
Okay. I also want to talk about cheap data at this point in time, because that seems to be cutting down on the revenues of all the major telecom players. In a country like India, where data is so cheap and there is a high competition to get as many consumers as you can, what sort of impact does it have on the long-term prospects as far as consumers is concerned? Do you think data is going to be more expensive going forward?
I fear for that. I think some of the big growth that's come in India over the last 5 years, post the pandemic and clearly post Jio's arrival in 2016, has been driven on the fact that India offers the cheapest internet data in the world. Right? We're really talking of 25 cents for a GB, and that the average Indian now consumes close to 25 GB a month, which is incredible. But sitting on top of that great data grab are a range of digital services. Right, so everything from what the government has done, the Jam Trinity as they call it, right, the Jandar, Aadhaar, Mobile Trinity, the fact that we've got some of large global platforms, right, whether it's the Amazon, the Flipkarts, the Ubers, the Olas, the Swiggis, the Zomatos. I think all of this sits on the fact that India has this deeply well-penetrated internet user base. And I think that's really come at the back of cheap data. The moment data prices start inching upwards, I think it's going to affect not just telco services, but a range of digital services, some of vital public interest. When you talk of a lot of the government services that get enabled through digital infrastructure, I think that's impactful. And I truly believe, Shweta, that one of the biggest things we have to be proud about is our great digital stack, which has been built on the back of this cheap data, but also on some great kind of founding pillars, right from the Aadhaar to the, the Jandan, the bank accounts reaching close to 750 million Indians.
Okay, stay with us, Llyod. We also have Kumardeep Banerjee, who's a telecom analyst, joining us in the studio at this point in time. Kumardeep, before I go to the larger telecom picture, I want to talk particularly about Vodafone and how Vodafone is bleeding, losing its revenue market share in the financial year 20. And I'm going to give data here. It was 27.1%. It is now down to 17.3%, while Airtel and other competition, Jio in this case, their revenue has only been increasing. What's hurting Vodafone, and how likely do you think it's going to continue to bleed if it continues to bleed like the way it is?
See, so here is the point that I really don't want to comment on Vodafone as per se, because I'm ex-Vodafone. So that's a disclaimer here. But having said that, there are a couple of reasons. The market has undergone a severe churn. And as my dear friend Llyod was also mentioning, and hello Llyod, good to see you, meet you virtually. My dear friend Llyod was also mentioning a short while back that the technology has undergone a substantial change in the past couple of years. First was 4G, and now we have seen the incoming of 5G. Plus also remember that the company Vodafone has undergone an amalgamation merger. They have merged with another telecom company. So when two giants merge, then it takes time for things to settle down. So it would be wrong on my part to predict how long will the bleeding process continue, but yes, the numbers do speak for themselves. We have seen the customer base as well as the market share depleting number of quarters, but I think that these are market forces at play, and at some point of time things will stabilize. I remember a time a couple of years back, 4 or 5 years back, when we were looking at a situation when one of the leading telecom operators, their promoters had made this famous quote that the market will stabilize at 30%, 30%, 30%. So 30% with player A, B, C, and then the remaining with whatever player is left in the market. But we are slowly moving in that direction. So even if you look at the overall market share, this is how the situation will pan out in some time.
Okay. As an ex-Vodafone person, since you put the disclaimer out there.
I do have to. I should.
What's hurting Vodafone at this point in time? We know that rollout of 5G has been slow, especially in rural areas. That could be one of the reasons why it's hurting. People continue to port. We were just discussing before we started this segment that people continue to port. Active users like even me for that matter, who have been a Vodafone customers, continue to port. What exactly is Vodafone not doing correct? Or what it can do better? Let me rephrase this.
So I think let's not put it on Vodafone, but let's say that every telecom operator today needs a massive amount of money to be sunk into telecom infrastructure, because 5G is a completely different technology. They need to put money literally into the ground to connect and to build up that faster network architecture. And as we are talking about 5G, we are already mulling about getting onto 6G. That's a different architecture that we are talking about. So when a new architecture comes, I don't know whether you have seen the data which has come out from the Department of Telecommunications as of March. The data has come out in April, which states how many sites have been made active by two of the players. Maybe Vodafone has not put up sites, but I must put a disclaimer. I must mention here that Vodafone, with Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla now coming on board of Vodafone, it seems like things are going to take a step ahead. There is going to be a boost in investor confidence. Now, when that happens, hopefully there will be more money, and that money needs to pure play get into capital expenditure, which is like literally putting money in putting up sites. They already have taken up or have spectrum for about 13 circles, as far as I remember. That's the 5G spectrum they have got for 13 circles. in order to fulfill the licensing conditions, they might need to roll out and make 5G services live in a couple of locations. I'm not too sure about the numbers at this point of time, but they need to put up the or make those sites live in the next quarter with the money, with the investor confidence coming back. Hopefully they will have money to sink in that kind of money and get their 5G network in place.
Okay, and you know, talking about the overall telecom sector at this point in time, could you draw us a comparison of where the top 3 players stand when you compare their revenue market share up as opposed to their customer market share?
So that's really a very technical question. So as far as the revenue market share and the CMS is,
are they in sync? Let me ask a broader question then. Are they in sync?
See, it's a difficult question because not all of them are listed.
Okay.
So the numbers that you get are some of it maybe what the company wants us to know. Some of us maybe what the numbers need to be analyzed. So it's a difficult question to answer. Where do they stand as far as CMS RMS numbers are concerned? But having said that, if you look at the funding pipeline and the way the networks are being rolled out, well, the market forces do say a lot about the financial health of these companies.
Okay, and let's talk about the market forces. There are a number of reasons why telecom companies, you know, are doing the way they're doing. Aggressive 5G rollouts, to penetration, to more, you know, capital expenditure. How do you see telecom sector panning out with these top 2 players, especially Jio trying to bleed out the other players?
Again, those are leading questions, but let's say that, I mean, you know, 5G is here to stay.
Okay.
And whichever form, whether it's 4.5G or it's 5G or 4.75G, we yet need to have the proof of the pudding. And proof of the pudding lies in having it. I don't know which part of town you stay in, but depending on where you stay, most people in any area, whichever network they are in, would be complaining of network failures, of call drops. It is happening all across all networks. Now, there is a reason why it is happening. The reason is that there are a couple of reasons. One could be that there is a transition element involved because many operators are shifting from 4G to 5G or trying to move a substantial part of the customer base from 4G to 5G. At this point of time, if you ask me, and as if I heard Llyod correctly, he was mentioning that the technology is needed for pushing through government's key digital themes or digital policies, which includes the digital public infrastructure, which is going to be, or which is turning out to be, one of the biggest success stories coming out of India in the past decade. Okay. What is the digital public infrastructure that we are talking about? We are talking about a unique identity platform through Aadhaar, or a unique digital identity through Aadhaar, which is making welfare schemes of the government possible through digital identification. We are talking about riding on that architecture, we are talking about the unified payment interface, the UPI, which is 8 billion transactions per month. That is the largest number of digital transactions happening on the planet as of now. And you know that the transactions go down as low as ₹2. I made a payment of ₹4 yesterday because I forgot to. I mean, yeah, that's a story.
Change in your pocket.
No, because I didn't have the money.
Who carries cash?
Yeah, ₹4 and at the last level. Even if you go to a village, you will find. I mean, you have seen visuals of those dholwalas with UPI number printed on their dhol or on their band for making the payments, shagan payments as they are called. The third is, of course, CoWIN, which is the digital identity architecture through which most of the healthcare facilities are likely to be rolled out. And there are multiple. Then there is the open ONDC network, which is basically democratizing in a way the e-commerce sector. And then there could be multiple other utilities which can climb or which can come on top of this architecture one above the other. So what I'm saying is that this technology, all these technologies are working in the existing technology, which is the 4G or the 4th generation mobility technology on any smartphone. So as long as the 4G technology is robust, we might need 5G technology for moving to a faster network zone, but those will be more for machine-to-machine communications and for AI kind of applications.
And quantum computing, which has just come back into vogue. And especially
one of the examples that we used to give was that, how long do you think, let me ask you a question, how long do you think before you think an self-driven car would be a possibility in Chandni Chowk area?
Not in my lifetime.
It's a very far-fetched idea, very far-fetched idea.
Why do you think so?
Because of the congestion in the area.
But that is the, that's
how much will you teach the machine
technology.
Is the point. Machine learning is
Exactly.
great. How much will you teach the machine? It's difficult to teach a human being how to drive in Chandni Chowk.
You know, we've had instances where a self-driven car could not drive in well-connected roads with very little to no hindrances. We're talking about Chandni Chowk, where you'll find every person at every inch. I mean, it's such a...
But we saw the Bill Gates video, right? We saw the Bill Gates video sitting absolutely tight in the front seat of a car, which was pretty much driving on its own.
Okay.
So it's not that far. But yeah, it's impossible to teach human beings how to drive in Chandni Chowk, not for their own,
You first teach human beings
but for the surprises that can pop up from any direction.
So there you go. So as long as the existing technology, that is the 4G technology, is doing good, we are good. 5G will come. I mean, I don't think that there will be too many human users for 5G as much as there would be for machine-to-machine communications, for talking to your fridge, for making to a smart home, making your city smarter, those kind of stuff. So that's the way technology, that's the way telecommunications is headed.
Okay. Let me come to Llyod. We can see him right here. Llyod, you know, you've written extensively about the need for a three-player system in telecom business, you know, moving beyond duopoly. Nobody likes a duopoly. As consumer especially, I would not like a duopoly. I would need more variety to choose from. What do we really do to ensure that it's a three-player system in telecom business?
Yeah, I'd say, Shweta, three at the bare minimum. I think what has got us here, and as Kumar rightly outlined, is that the fact that there was intense competition drove data prices down. The fact that Jio played disruptor kind of really made India being the best place for data in the world in terms of pricing. And that has enabled a whole ecosystem. And I think what we're not talking about is also livelihoods. You know, I read a data point that said there are 4 crore Indians, 40 million Indians, who kind of gig work, whether you call them delivery boys for Urban Ladder, Amazon, you know, the works, you know, Uber, Ola, etc. And a lot of their livelihood depends on that mobile phone, right? And the cheap data, in a sense, enables a livelihood. So I think the real elephant in the room, which I guess we need to get at, is what's the government's stake when it comes to BSNL. You're talking of, you know, BSNL that has 65,000 employees. That's the big red herring. At the same time, bleeds about 80,000 rupees a year. That's what they owe the government in AGR every year. Now, does this continue, or does at some level the government kind of enable a third or maybe a fourth player? The fact that Vodafone Idea is sitting pretty with still about 20% of the subscriber base, and there's BSNL. So I think effectively we need at least 3 to 4 economically viable players that don't run the risk of running up NPAs with banks. At the same time, they're able to compete effectively in the marketplace. So consumers get quality service. They're able to make investments in newer technology for 5G and beyond. And importantly, they kind of keep each other's pricing on check, right? So there's the moment someone's taking the price down, other two kind of balance it out. Right now, we're in this funny situation where, you know, I'm not making any kind of illusions. The fact that two players can gradually drive the market price up. Now, while it's in a few paise, we may not notice, but I think the moment we're stepping up beyond where we are, I think we run the risk of a whole lot of people falling off the telecom map. Right? Today, we talk about 750 million internet users, right? Out of which about 500 million have transacted, as Kumar said, through UPI or whatever form. I think the moment that starts shrinking, we lose a little bit of our growth momentum. And I would say the government's objective should be in the next 4 years to get to 1 billion internet users in India. I think that's going to enable a lot of stuff. And the only way that can happen is you can have at least 3 viable competitive players. I think that's the single line kind of recipe the government has to work towards.
Okay.
I think the larger question here is how will you expect the government to really ensure that there is a third viable player? We've already seen that the government has sort of, helped bail out Vodafone from its debt situation by converting that into equity and ends up owning about 30%. The point is there has to be fresh capital infusion. just getting rid of liabilities is not going to be enough. There has to be fresh capital infusion for any third player.
Okay.
I think a larger question is, are we heading towards a duopoly? Now, it's irrespective whether the third player would be a BSNL or a Vodafone or somebody else, a new surprise springing up. The question falls back to the fact who has the deepest pockets. And I think no guess is there. It's very easy in a duopoly for a Reliance to also have the potential to bleed out a Bharti Airtel in time. We've seen, you know, the fight for ARPU has been going on. Players have been able to increase their ARPU significantly, 17% to 22% being the range. But the point is, how do you increase your ARPU? Are you making your data more expensive, or are you making your entry plans higher? So Airtel, for example, has made, let's say, the 99 rupee prepaid 28-day validity pack, taken it up from 99 rupees to about 149 rupees, right? It's a good 50% jump. You're offering more data. So data continues to be cheap, but you're increasing your ARPU by making the lowest entry a little more expensive.
Okay. Falling back to Lloyd's point, does that somewhere, you know, bring in the fears that you're throwing people off the telecom map? And Kumar, maybe you'd like to come in here at this point in time. By making the entry data pack more expensive, are you devoiding people of cheap data that India takes a lot of pride in?
Actually not. There is still a lot of room for India to still be the cheapest data market in the world, and increase the prices a little bit more. It's just a matter of I would say the marketing guys of these telecom companies as to how they come up with those pack plans, as they are called, or as Kartik was mentioning, as to whether they increase the entry barrier or the entry point by about, say, $100 or $50, or do they actually go ahead and increase the price of per GB of data. Now, that's something which these guys do it smartly, and I'm sure that there are ways of doing it. But more importantly, there are other ways of making money. It is to get the consumers to be hooked on to a good network. The amount of time the consumer, the user spends on your network is money. That's something that they can always work on, and that requires a very stable, robust network, no matter which operator you are.
Okay. So, Kumar, I have a very fundamental question. Whoever the third player may be, if you're saying we are potentially not heading towards a duopoly,
we are not.
Lloyd is saying we are possibly getting there, and it's going to take a lot for a third player to not let that situation happen, or for the government or the Competition Commission of India to not let a duopoly happen. You have a Jio which has gone beyond pure data, pure telecom into great value-added services. Where are you watching your IPL matches, right? Or where did you watch the World Cup?
That's right.
Right. Similarly, Airtel has got a great, robust broadband connection in addition to wireless. It gives you the landline virtually for free. It's got the Airtel Xtreme. It's got the OTT aggregation apps. So just investing in pure data infrastructure, to my mind, is not going to suffice for any third player to survive. BSNL, because of a large government base, because of a base outside of the metros where perhaps broadband has still yet to penetrate the way it has penetrated in urban, will continue to survive. But for any other viable third player, you need this value addition to grow in addition to putting up towers and putting up data offering possibilities.
So I completely agree with you. That's
so
what I was hitting.
How does a third player do that? The amount of investments we are talking about with all of this combined becomes huge, and there doesn't seem to be a viable player ready to make those investments in India right now. Which brings us back to the possibility of a duopoly or fringe players existing when the prices get defined by these top two players, and eventually a possibility of the top player bleeding out the second because he has deeper pockets. So where does it leave Shweta, you and me, when it comes to our data prices, let's say 3 years, 5 years from now?
I mean, that's a long time in telecom's history. 3 years, 5 years of now.
But you do think it's a long run.
If we are looking at 5 years horizon, believe me.
Will we have a viable third player in 5 years?
If we are talking about a 5 years horizon, Suffice it to say that there will be a new technology which will not be based on this
Who is going to be the early adopter of that technology? Obviously, the guys who have the money, the guys who have the consumer base.
We are talking about spectrum Starlink kind of services. We are talking about mobile or any kind of telephony which works 50 kilometers below ground.
Who's going to be the early adopter? A guy with money, the guy with deep pockets is more likely to move into being an early adopter.
Nimble solutions available. So which brings me that what stops us from saying and thinking, remember what Llyod said. He said that India has got 750, I would say 800 million active, let's say, internet users, out of which say 500 million would be active on the internet, mobile internet users, to be fair. Government's aim and stated aim is that within a year or so, it will go up to 1 billion.
Right.
That makes India the largest mobile broadband market in the world.
And hence more dangerous if there is
therefore
one
hold your thought. Therefore, isn't it a lucrative market for one of these content or one of these new age technology players to come in and pick up what you call some legacy spectrum, some legacy BTS sites, and some offices lying here and there.
Right.
Put them all together and use that as a giant content factory. Because what you were mentioning,
this trend line has been visible for a while.
Yes.
We've still seen companies like Tata Docomo getting out of the market. Many other, I think you mentioned the figure of 32 when we spoke earlier today. There were 32 telecom operators.
Yes.
The trend line going up has been visible for decades. And we are still faced with a situation where there are two players thriving and no real avenue for a third player to really rake up its market stake.
They will. Let's wait and watch the game.
You're optimistic.
I'm optimistic.
Are you optimistic?
You know, just one quick point I wanted to make. One is the fact that last year the government infused 35,000 crores into BSNL to keep it going, right? And to my mind, BSNL is the other kind of solid story, like airlines, Air India continued forever. The fact that in a pre-election year, the government can't take a hard call, but to keep infusing 35,000 crores in a loss-making organization, which technically has the best access to spectrum and infrastructure, is a bit of a mug's game. But this
is taxpayers' money.
The other point that I heard Kumar make, and I just want to just react to that, is that we talked about a 50 rupees increase and a gradual growing of data rates to raise ARPU. I think that's where the bottom falls off the market, right? The 50 rupees doesn't mean much to most of us in this studio, but 50 rupees really means that 4 rupee thing that you buy or that 20 rupee nariyal pani, that guy can no longer afford a connection. And that's when the market starts going down. So my concern is that we really have to watch for that long tail. Actually, when the number hits a billion people, and all billion of them can transact, even if it means making a 2 rupee transaction. I think that's what we should gun for. That's when the nation benefits. That's when the economy benefits. That's when the GDP goes up. The short term of growing ARPU is obviously a big concern for Mr. Mittal and Mr. Ambani. I think there's a larger national issue at stake. Sooner than later, I think the government has to address that elephant in the room.